Most homeschool parents are following the track of high schools and public and private high schools, and they're doing the same courses that you would see, and especially in terms of math and science. That's wonderful if you're trying to do the same thing they are doing. But one of the things that you see is that's a one size fits all or a one size fits most. Many of the bigger school systems have a couple of different tracks, some of them have a lot of different tracks. But what you need to be thinking about is, or what your student needs, most homeschool parents are following the track of high schools and public and private high schools, and they're doing the same courses that you would see, and especially in terms of math and science. That's wonderful if you're trying to do the same thing they are doing. But one of the things that you see is that's a one size fits all or a one size fits most. Many of the bigger school systems have a couple of different tracks, some of them have a lot of different tracks. But what you need to be thinking about is, or what your student needs to be thinking about, is where they are heading and what they want to do. I think a lot of people do it and do it wrong, because all we're trying to do is match up to an ACT and SAT, which is still, we're in homeschool. We have choices, and there's more and more people moving to flexibility and choices, and yet we're kind of running back and following the same end goal that everybody else is. So if your student is heading toward a STEM type of degree, meaning science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and maybe I might throw medicine in there or something, then sure, you've got to get a college degree. You've got to, well, you don't, and many of those you have to have a college degree, but on some of those you don't near as much. Even the computer science and the engineering, we're seeing some of those being outside of college, but at least they have a return on investment. But point being, you need to make a path choice. You don't need to. I guess you have the opportunity to. That's what we should consider. You and your student have the opportunity to make choices that fit what they are trying to do and what they are interested in. There's just nothing more frustrating than trying to fit in there inside everybody's mold. And I don't know about you, but I'm sick of doing that. So here's a couple of things to think about. First and foremost, there is no one size fits all program. Now, do we want our kids to be educated? Absolutely. Do we want them to know the basics of reading and writing and mathematics and science and things like that? Absolutely, we do. The fact is, probably most of them know more than we think, just because of the social media out there. But let's just assume that we still need to teach that. The public school system, private school system, kind of teaches calculus is the ultimate goal for mathematics, for instance. So let's just talk about the math track. And most students don't really make it to that point, but that's their goal. Most people are hitting an Algebra II or Trig or pre-calculus, if you will. It's the same thing. In homeschool, it's kind of the same model, mostly because we follow the same model. Now, there's some advantages to following the same model. It's well worn and well tracked, and it certainly, if you're heading to college, it has some advantages. But I think there's an advantage to us is we get to think about goals and objectives. So even at the public-private sector schools, they struggle because not every student fits into their mold, but they're dealing with 30, 40 students in a classroom. You just got to go along. So what we find is most families in the homeschool realm stop at Algebra II with Trig, also just like in the public-private sector. And maybe they might switch over to something like a consumer math or like our Money Works course that we have. We see a lot of people switch over to those kind of things for personal finance, some things that you wish you would have learned in school. All that's fine, but there's no one set path. And what your friends do, what your peers do, what your cover school recommends. As long as you're meeting the requirements, you get to choose the path. So the second thing is to think about is to ask the right questions. Uh, and and that question is, where are you heading? Now, let's be honest about that. Most teens don't know. Even if they think they know, they don't really know, because they are having interest in something, but they don't really know what that looks like in the real world, right? We get our interest sometimes from television and movies, and um, well, not television and movies near as much, but we get our interest from video content and a bunch of content out there and engagement with other people, but we don't really have a lot of connections. For instance, we may not know people really doing what we think we are interested in doing, and that's very common. Um, in people that are going to college. Period. By the way, that's actually common in adults. So I shouldn't. We're not picking on teenagers here, but there's just no context, right? So, where are they heading is a little bit of a hard game to plan through. Except as you can see personality, you can kind of see some things that they're bent to. One of the jokes that you would say is, if your child is taking everything apart and putting it back together and rebuilding it in different ways, there's some signs there that the engineering and science and those kind of things may be of interest to them. Maybe not. Maybe it's more mechanics and things like that. That's more practical, hands-on. But there, you can see some signs that maybe that's not a literature type of person. Um, but as you're looking at the signs, you can say, okay, where might this be heading? And of course, they have their own interest of what they want to do. Where might this be heading? So the one thing you don't want to be doing, clearly, is giving them a weak path, a weak structure, so that they cannot go forward. You want to be giving them a clear set of guidelines of how to get from point A to point B. And if you're doing, if you have hamstring them in such a way that you don't give them enough, then they got to go back and repeat. For instance, if you haven't taken hardly any mathematics and you end up in a STEM type of career, then or STEM college career field, then you're going to spend a bunch of time taking some mathematics. That's not really a deal killer. That happens for many, but it's just something to be think about. So, I mean, the other thing is real life skills. Real life mathematics skills such as time, money, how money works is the course that we've got. It's just common sense things that, well, I say common sense, that most people don't actually know about those things. But be thinking about where they are heading and what mathematics they may need for that. If they're heading to college, start asking the universities, do they need calculus? Do they need pre-calculus? What does that look like? Ask the right questions. The third thing you want to do is look at is an issue of burnout. So as our teenagers move through algebra and let's state that pretty much we need algebra. And I would say most students are going to need algebra and geometry, partly because algebra is so fundamental. Geometry is actually doable, and a lot of us see geometry in our work. Whether you're an artist, a builder, a plumber, whatever, geometry shows up in all these kind of things. But some students don't take to it as well. They don't like the mathematics as much. A lot of students have a hang up because society says math is hard and I can't stand math, and we see all that. So we walk into these courses a little bit anxious. But if that's not for you and you keep plowing forward through Algebra 2 and Calculus, and we see a lot of our customers do that, and it's just not that much fun, and there's just burnout. Now, part of the reason that they're burnout is they're bored doing this when part of them wants to be doing something else. So a lot of burnout, that's what's happening, is I'm spending my time doing A, I wish I was doing B, or at least I feel like that's what I was. So it's an interest game. My interests have changed. So burnout is a real thing we see going on in mathematics. Teens tend to hit a wall in Algebra 2 with trig, or they love it. But the thing that you have to watch out for in the burnout is becoming to the mindset of, I'm bad at math. And if we look at our culture, right? We look at what's going on in the United States, is that's kind of the mantra out there is we're all bad at math, we all hate math, which is interesting because it's some of the high skilled areas that we need for the growth of our country. Right, so we don't see that mantra going on in other countries. So we don't want to come out with that. So you don't want to be forcing something down somebody's throat when it's just not something they want to do, just because you're trying to meet some arbitrary goal. So again, back to asking the right questions of what are the goals that you're trying to meet. So here's what we, with these kind of three things in mind, here's what we recommend people do is use algebra. Go into algebra. It's so fundamental. The Jacob's Algebra book that we use, and so we've got the video components to go with it, and we support it. That is fundamental, and you pretty much, people say all the time, I've never used algebra in my life. You have. You're not even realizing you're using it. You use it when you shop, you use it when you cook, you use it all the time in making decisions. It's so ingrained in you that you just don't see it. But that's another video. But the other thing is the geometry, like I was saying before, and we use Harold Jacobs Geometry. And the reason that we use this book is because it is, we use this, we have the videos go with it, is it's so real world. Geometry should be taught with a real world perspective. And this thing is just loaded with real issues. Everything from sports to machines to planetary motion, to how you put a ladder up against the wall, just all kinds of common sense things that you see everywhere that we use all the time. Whether you're a mathematician or you're just somebody who just has a life, right? And you have to deal with things going on, just owning a home. It's just such practical type of stuff. So now after that, and those two are kind of fundamental, but after that you can kind of say, well, what comes next? And one of the things that we think is important is how money works, or understanding money. It's fundamental to what we do. The other things that some people might be doing, you see some people doing statistics and business math. A lot of people do dual enrollment, but for different maths, but depending on what they're going. But you've got so many options. Just sticking to the plan that everybody else is doing just because everybody else is doing it, or because that's what the universities say that they want and that you need, and you're not even sure that's what your kids want to do. You've got options. You've got a lot of options. So the right math path that builds up your team is what you want to think about, not just fills the transcript. The transcripts are usually pretty easy because for most of you, your state and your homeschool cover schools and any other regulations are fairly minimal for you to meet the requirements, and fairly flexible. Most do require some algebra. Many require 3 maths, and so you can be creative in where those maths come from depending on what your student wants. So we'll put a link down in the description here to our algebra, and we will also put a link to our transcript tool that many of you have been using and asking about, just to help you think through how to record these things as you go through high school. All right, if you have any questions, we'd love to answer them. Our email is support@askdrcallahan.com. We'll see you next time.